Slone, a former Juno Award-nominated rock star, co-host of one of this country's biggest sports programs, Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show, coming up!
Oh, we're very excited about this week's guest. She was born in Montreal, raised in Nova Scotia. She's an actress, a singer, rock vocalist for Joydrop, TV personality, human rights activist, co-host of Rogers Hometown Hockey, and host of Top of Her Game, a great show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Tara Slone. Tara, great to have you here.
What a lovely introduction. Nice to be here.
Well, you know, we like to begin at the beginning here, so we're going to talk about your roots. You were trained in classical voice training with the goal of becoming an opera singer. How did that factor into your life and your careers as it unfolded?
Well, I mean, I guess performance has always been part of what I do, but I really gravitated towards music in general, and that has woven its way through my entire career. But I had kind of the voice for classical music. I loved singing in choirs when I was young and started taking classical lessons, and that was my trajectory. Unfortunately, I found that I just didn't have the discipline required at the age of 18. You know, you go from high school and you're kind of a big fish in a small pond, and then you're off to study in university, and everybody's good, and you have to work for hours a day. And I just wasn't prepared to do that, but music never left me. And that's how I sort of made the leap into rock music.
Right. And there was a job at a record store, apparently, that helped get you motivated and inspired you in that direction. Tell us about that.
Well, I was so lucky. I mean, these are the days when record stores were, you know, the kind of meeting spots for the musically minded in any given town. So I worked at Sam the Record Man in Halifax all through high school. I ended up working at Sam the Record Man in Montreal as well, just before I went off to Concordia University. So I consider that a major part of my musical education. I worked on the classical floor for a while and had free reign. I could kind of open and listen to whatever I wanted. And was exposed to a lot of indie rock music, and I loved it.
You also did some theater, some musical theater, and tell us about that experience and what that was like and how that tied into what you ended up doing down the road.
So when I decided that opera was not the discipline for me, I moved to Montreal and I went to Concordia for theater performance. And so that was my focus for a while. I did regular theater. I did a musical theater. I spent a summer in Kingston doing the Rocky Horror Show, which was amazing. I did a lot of TV and film and episodic work in Montreal and Toronto. You know, I think it just all ties in. I never had broadcasting in my sights, but I think all of these, you know, these disciplines tied together. And so by the time I jumped into broadcasting, which wasn't until many years later, you know, I had these different skill sets that I could pull from. So I think for me, you know, being able to be on a stage in front of a live audience, that's been a huge training and hugely applicable when it comes to Rogers Hometown Hockey in particular.
Right. And I you know, doing the research, I found out a lot of sort of similarities, a lot of crossovers, some of which we'll talk about more later. But, you know, I was going to be an actor. I took Fine Arts University drama and was going in that direction. My last year of school, met my wife-to-be. We decided that we wanted to have some sort of more security than an acting gig would offer. Acting gigs would offer. And so I decided I really love doing sportscasts, right? I was a sports fan, former amateur boxer. I didn't know it was my thing. And I started working for the campus radio station, University of Alberta, sent some tapes out just after I graduated. This would be early 1982. And my first gig was in Red Deer. at a place called CKRD, and I did the afternoon newscasts from 5 to 10, and then I did the sportscast on TV at 11:30. And the guy who did the afternoon drive shift at Red Deer, and who also did the weather on, funny enough, at CKRD at that particular time, was a guy named Ron McLean, and your sidekick on Rogers Hometown Hockey. So I thought, okay, there's another interesting crossover there. So I thought I'd share that. We'll get into Ron's stuff a little bit later on,
Sure.
and that situation. But I want to talk about your musical career because you got involved with a band called Joydrop, and tell us how that became about, and how you ended up with that group, and there was a lot of good things happened. Obviously, you guys were nominated for a Juno. Tell us about that part of your life. Fun, challenging, demanding. What was going on for you?
Well, it was interesting. I moved from Montreal out of school. I moved to Toronto really to pursue acting. But, I think when you have a passion like music, it's always in your blood. And so I was actually looking through the weekly paper Now magazine, which none of these exist anymore. But back in those days, there was I magazine and Now magazine. And I was looking through the classifieds because I was new to Toronto. I didn't really know people here. And I was looking for some musical colleagues, really just to play with. I didn't have any eye or design on becoming a professional touring rock musician. In fact, I don't think I even really knew that was a possibility for somebody like me. Excuse me. So I looked in Now magazine. I'd answered a few different classifieds. None of them seemed like the right fit. And I remember this one said, looking for rock goddess, call Tony. So I called Tony, and well, maybe I'm the rock goddess you're looking for. So he said, okay, come on down to Cherry Beach Studios, which is where their rehearsal space was at the time. I went, I met the band, 3 guys, Tom, Tony, and Thomas, and in comes Tara. They played me some of the songs they'd already written. I know. And they'd been a band together for a while. So they had a repertoire of songs. I loved what they played me. I sang with them. And I knew the moment I walked out of that room that band was for me. So I said, I want this. And they called me the next day and said, we want you. And we got to work. And I think 7 months later, we signed a record deal with a label in the United States. Put out our first album in North America the year after, toured solid for a couple of years. And, it was something that I really never expected to do. Like I said, I didn't even know that was a life that I could jump into. And it's very demanding. You're 200 plus shows a year. The first part of our touring life was in a 15 passenger van. It's a very grueling experience. We graduated to a tour bus eventually, which was a godsend. But I wouldn't trade in that experience for anything. You log that many hours on the road, you log that many hours doing live performances and that many reps, and it serves you well.
Well, you were great. We because of copyright issues, we didn't want to bring the sound up on that stuff because we get flagged for it. But right. I encourage anybody who's watching the show to go to YouTube, check out any of your stuff with Joydrop, and of course your solo stuff too, because we're going to talk a little bit about that. You did have a solo career. You also were on Rockstar INXS. Tell us about those experiences and what was that? You're a finalist on Rockstar INXS.
Well, so Joydrop, we did our thing for a few solid years. Well, I guess we were together for 6 years, and as is the case with a lot of bands, you wonder what happened to them, and then you realize that it was just things beyond their control. And for us, our record company was absorbed by a larger record company. We lost our record deal, and we just didn't have the, we weren't gelling enough at the time to really kind of jump back into it. And so we decided to dissolve, and I was at a loss as to what to do. I started working on some solo material, and then in 2005, this Rockstar INXS opportunity arose. I was really hesitant. It was the early days of those types of performance contests. The only one that existed was American Idol. And so I wasn't sure it was going to be good for my career, but I knew that it was something that I would regret if I didn't do it. And so they started with the top 15. They already, all the culling that happened, all the whittling down from thousands of applicants happened not on camera, which I think is a good thing. And so we started with 15 people in Los Angeles. We were living in this giant mansion in Silver Lake. I mean, it was a total trip. It was, we were sequestered. We weren't allowed to have, any access to television or the internet. It was just a fishbowl. It was very weird. But ultimately, I ended up coming in 9th. And, it really, honestly, it didn't do anything, I would say, for my music career. But it opened the door for television. And so as I look back on that experience, I think that is kind of, that really is, that was the fork in the road. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what brought me to my career now.
So you made that transition. Was it hard letting go of the party scene? Because there certainly has to be some of that involved with that, that lifestyle.
Yeah, I think the whole, for me, it was really letting go of the identity, like Tara, the rock musician. And I mean, Tara, the TV hosting isn't so bad, but when you just really, there can be a lot of yourself that's wrapped up in this label. But yeah, for sure. I mean, it was, my first job was at a small station in Toronto, and it was 9 to 6. And that was like completely a challenging adjustment for me because I was used to going to bed at 2 or 3 and waking up at 11. And so yeah, it takes some time. But for me, that was the biggest thing to shake, was like, oh, I'm not Tara from Joydrop anymore. I'm not Tara the musician anymore. Even though I know that's not true. I'm not doing music professionally, but I'm still Tara the musician. But it was a healthy transition for me. I will say that I think there are some people who can live their life on the road and keep up that late night lifestyle. And for me, it wasn't going to be a positive, it wasn't sustainable for me. So I'm glad that I moved into a bit of a different sleep schedule.
Well, in the broadcast business, generally speaking, you have to be willing to go where the jobs are, and it's kind of tough to pick your spots. Like I didn't decide to be at CTV Toronto. I had to start, as I mentioned, in Red Deer and campus radio. But when ending up in Calgary, Breakfast TV, that seemed to be a pretty good gig for you and seemed to suit your talents and everything else. That was a good gig. How'd you end up there?
My executive producer from what was then called Sun TV in Toronto, it wasn't Sun News Network. It was just this little station that Sun Media was hanging on to. And so that's where I had my first job in Toronto. And I went on mat leave. I didn't know what I was going to do because Sun TV had become Sun News Network, and I knew that was not a place that I was going to be comfortable working. It turned out that my executive producer had gotten a job in Calgary at City TV, and there was an opening for a host. So I auditioned and landed it. It was an adjustment. My ex-husband now, but my partner at the time, he's from St. Albert, Alberta, and he had gone to school at Mount Royal in Calgary, so it wasn't a foreign place to him. So that gave me some level of comfort. But yeah, I mean, I knew that hosting a large market morning show was not going to happen for me anywhere else, and it was a huge opportunity. And I still say it's like when you do a show like that, which is live. And it's long, it's 3.5 hours a day of live TV. There's really no better training. So I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, you got some really cool gigs there as well. A lot of cool stuff to do. We got some video from your spot back then. We actually There's the ice bucket challenge. Vic, can you roll some of that? Here we go.
Right? That's like, that's just morning TV, par for the course.
Pretty cool. Yeah, for sure. And other looking through some other stuff we saw that you our buddy Paul Paskus, he's the video is he pulled some great stuff. There's a chance for you to interview the Prime Minister at the Calgary Stampede, the Prime Minister at the time. That was kind of a fun experience for you, right? There's a lot of good things were happening.
Yeah, I mean, it was when you work on a show like that, it really runs the gamut, right? Like you'll have Norm Macdonald one day and the Prime Minister the next. Justin Trudeau came through. The Stampede is always that, that place where all the political hopefuls come through. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, amazing guests. I remember the first foodies will appreciate this. Like one of the first guests I interviewed was Eric Repair, who is a top-rated Michelin chef. Like those things just happened. It was really neat. Jane Goodall, she was also in my first month being there.
Wow.
So really cool stuff, and a lot of sports figures, a lot of hockey players, a lot of athletes. So that was a thrill for me.
Yeah, being in Canada, hockey is kind of a thing we get pulled to, right? and of course, I think that's a good way to transition into Rogers' hometown hockey, and then that transition. Tell us about how that came about.
Well, I was a big hockey fan, and even when I was in Joydrop, I was appearing on Off the Record with Michael Landsberg very regularly. So and was doing some early internet work for them. And again, didn't have any design on becoming a broadcaster in sports or otherwise. But when I started to move into broadcasting, I started to turn my attention towards sports and as somewhere I wanted to be. And so, as luck would have it, Sportsnet is owned by Rogers. City TV is owned by Rogers. So that was a connection that I was able to make and started some conversations with the powers that be at Sportsnet. And so when Rogers secured the NHL deal, they put out a press release that said, we're going to be doing this touring show that highlights hockey stories from around the country. And I read that and I thought, I want to be a part of that. So I threw my hat into the ring. I sent the then president, Scott Moore, an impassioned letter saying telling him why I thought I would be a good choice for that. And, it was a process. I had a lot of conversations. I met Ron, but they brought me onto the show.
That's pretty cool. I mean, getting to that point, as you ran into some challenges along the way, and I know it's documented that you had issues with panic attacks when you were in Calgary on the air, and we've all got our own issues. Mine has to do with addiction issues, but tell us about getting through that experience and how you were able to pull through that and get through the other side.
Well, my very first panic attack on the air happened in my first job in Toronto on Sun TV. And it was, it was a shock. I had never experienced something like that. And it was live on the air. Luckily, not a lot of people watched. And also, it really just preceded the era of YouTube and Twitter, where these things would have just made the rounds. I mean, a couple of years later, and it would have lived forever. But it was an awakening, and I think anybody who has experience with panic knows that once something happens that triggers you, that trigger repeats itself. So it took one panic attack for me and my brain to decide that to make that connection, like live TV equals panic. And so, I didn't have another full-blown panic attack on the air, but it became so crushing anxiety-wise to get on the air after that I thought, okay, well, either my career is going to be over before it starts, or I'm going to have to do something about this. And so I did.
Mm-hmm.
I sought out help. I did cognitive behavioral therapy for quite some time with a really amazing psychologist. And, I mean, you're never cured, but you learn how to navigate those situations. You learn how to avoid certain triggers. You learn that you're not going to die in that moment. I mean, you learn just a lot. And I also learned that I had been having panic attacks, at earlier points in my life, that I was prone to anxiety. And so you just kind of develop a little bit of a toolbox. And so it's something that has never disappeared. I've always struggled with nerves, and managing that. And so, it's a constant exercise. But meditation helps, and just certain things
Mm-hmm.
that I make sure that I do. Sleep helps. Not having a ton of caffeine before I go on the air helps. And Ron and I have had this conversation. I mean, he's an anxiety sufferer too. So many of us are. Um, so but I definitely think I couldn't have done it without seeking professional help. Not a chance.
Yeah, that is a big part of it, and we can't stress that enough, right? I mean, ask for help when there's a problem. Reach out, ask for help, and because there is a solution. You will find a solution if you're open
Mm-hmm.
to it. The other piece that I sort of resonated with me there is being afraid of feelings, right? Being afraid to feel, because I'm so old behavior, old ideas make me think that if I feel this feeling, it's going to decimate me. But I realize that if I do actually feel these feelings, if I feel a little bit of sadness, if I feel a little bit of fear, if I just let that go through me, and like you talked about meditation, I practice that as well. It's like allowing that those feelings to work their way through it, and then you get to that point where you
Right.
realize, you know what, I can handle these feelings. I don't have to be afraid of these feelings anymore, right? And of course,
Yeah.
all that stuff it's related to you know asking for help, reaching out for help, finding a way, to get through that with a great professional help too is really awesome. So your experience in Rogers hometown hockey provided all kinds of crazy opportunities. Where I was watching some video, you've been doing oyster farm and PEI. Uh, you saw how pucks were made in Sherbrooke, Quebec. You got a lesson in the bagpipes from Glenn Healy. He's
Yeah.
what a character he is in Oshawa. It looks like you're really enjoying yourself on the program. It looks like it's really perfect spot for you.
It's been a gift. I mean, that segment in particular, we call it our hometown must. It's the thing you must do in any given
Right.
community. So that's just a lot of fun, and just an opportunity to do something often a little bit outside of hockey, but something that a community is proud of showing off. And that's sort of the fun, goofy, like, oh, look, Tara will do anything, and she's really bad at it, but who cares? And I don't mind, I think I'm a good sport, so I don't mind putting myself into those situations. Um, but yeah, I mean, hometown hockey, it's been an absolute privilege and a gift. The people are happy to see us. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
great way to bring people together. And I think no matter who you are, you're proud of your hometown. And so for us to be tasked and honored, with um, the job of conveying, the pride of a community to the rest of Canada is just, it's like what a mind blowing experience.
I want to talk a little bit about working with Ron. I mean, my experience was limited a long time ago when he was just a pup, and we both were, I guess. And the what I did recall even way back then was the memory of this guy, the ability to ad lib like nobody had ever seen in my life. And I always had like some trepidation when I got on the air with him to start my shift, and I would say, I was worried about saying something that he would come at me, and then I'd have to respond to that, and then where's this going to go? And like I was full of fear by way back then, but he was so amazing. Like, tell us about working with Ron, what it's like.
Well, you're right. I mean, his memory it's unparalleled. He has a photographic memory, so it's just you can't keep up with it. It just is, right? So it does feel like a lot of pressure sometimes, because a lot of what we do in hometown hockey, we're telling stories and sort of little nuggets of stuff from around the community. But it's kind of like cramming for an exam every week, right? Like you roll into Pembroke, Ontario, and you learn this and this and this tidbit, but it's not stuff I knew before. And so it's a lot harder for me to commit stuff to memory. I rely on notes a lot, but Ron can look at his notes and spout it out. So, his talent is remarkable, and it's not just his memory, obviously, his ability to just, even if it's a story that sometimes veers where you think is off course, it's not. He brings it back and he wraps it up in a little bow. Really rarely stumbles. So he's a remarkable, once in a lifetime talent in that way. But he's a really generous broadcaster. I mean, I think from the beginning, he always had more faith in me than I did. He's never proprietary about, oh, this is my story, I want to tell this story. I think he's always in the service of the story itself and not who's telling it. I always felt like it was, even if I didn't feel like it, I felt like he felt like it was our show. And that helped me, feel less like a fish out of water. So he is where he is for a reason.
Well, I think that's a good match, because when you talk about inclusivity, I think that's what you're all about too. And that this program, of course, led to Top of Her Game, and Top of Her Game. You're nominated for a Canadian Screen Award as top talk show host as a result. I mean, how'd that feel to get those kind of that kind of recognition? And tell us about how the show came about.
Well, Top of Her Game is really, it was the child of hometown hockey. We have been so fortunate on hometown hockey to be offered a platform that they don't, I think doesn't really happen on a lot of other hockey or sports broadcasts. And we've had almost the same crew from the beginning, and we've all held the same belief that, in order to tell Canada's stories, it has to be representative of Canadians. And so that's why for us, a big priority has been representation and inclusivity. And so without that platform, I couldn't have jumped off and created Top of Her Game. And Top of Her Game came out of the pandemic at the beginning. There were no live sports happening, and there was an opportunity to jump in with something else. And so we started to do that. We're now figuring out what, given that live sports are back, and we're figuring out what the next incarnation of that project is going to look like. But I think it's clear to everyone that, women's sports are not represented enough in media at all, and certainly on our network, on any other network. So that drive is very strong for me, and I hope that I'll be able to continue that movement.
Well, on that vein, I actually pulled a clip here from Mary Kay Messier that she posted last week, and it was on LinkedIn, I believe. But she says, many feel confident the men's event, we're talking about the junior worlds, will be rescheduled, but will the women's under 18 tournament relying on economics to make these decisions is misguided at best. Girls represent growth and participation. Women are an important and growing fan segment for the National Hockey League. Women are more likely to support brands that share their values, and elite women players are some of the most dedicated ambassadors and role models for the sport of hockey. Beyond statistics, given the current landscape in hockey, it is more important than ever to challenge the status quo. We need to think differently and how we offer the game, looking for ways to appeal to a broader and more diverse audience. IIHF, would you consider brainstorming responses to find solutions to reschedule the women's under 18 tournament? What are your thoughts when you see something like that coming from Mary Kay Messier?
Well, Mary Kay and Bauer have have done great things. They have this whole new initiative called the Barn, which is, the barn is like where we all skate, and all means all. I mean, sponsors are going to be a huge driver in how the women's hockey movement and market grows. So I just think, Mary Kay, I love Mary Kay. I love Mary Kay's voice. We just need more Mary Kays. There are brands who really are putting their money where their mouths are. Scotiabank is another one, who are really dedicated to making that hockey is for everyone, not just a silly tagline, but making it a reality. And the reality is that, as Mary Kay said in that, one of the biggest growing demographics for the National Hockey League are girls and women. And certainly when it comes to minor hockey's growth, I mean, girls hockey is, leaps and bounds growing more than anything else. So it's time, I think, for, maybe, I don't even know if it's a leap of faith. I think it's just a recognition that now is the time to make these investments. And I think that the rewards will come shortly thereafter. So we just need more Mary Kays. That's it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. You also retweeted a quote from Jerry D, which I ultimately retweeted as well, which was pretty awesome too. He was talking about, imagine like you see these kids at the World the World Junior Championships, and the pieces that are done, and the focus that's done on them, the fact that they're front and center in the media for that 2-week period. We learned so much about them. Now imagine if we transfer that to the women's game, the women's junior championships, and what kind of response we get from that as well. And clearly, that's it, because if you look at the women's soccer team, for example, Christine Sinclair, Kadisha Buchanan. We know a lot about these. I had Alicia Chapman on the show. We know a lot about these women and what they accomplish, in their game, and what it's done for the game of soccer, what it's done for the game of soccer in Canada, and how that's grown. And look at when that Olympic gold medal soccer game was on, everybody in the country was glued to it. When the women are taking part in the Olympic gold medal in hockey, everybody in the country is tuned in and glued to it. So it takes a little bit more, I suppose, in terms of open-mindedness, and I think the NHL, there's a place for them to step up, no doubt about that.
I think that was the thought, and I'm not sure that's what's going to happen anymore. I mean, I don't claim to have any insider info. I kind of extrapolate here and there, but I mean, my understanding was that the NHL wanted the PHF, then the NWHL, and the PWHPA to make friends, and they weren't going to get anything going until there was, they didn't have to step in between. I think, especially given, the pandemic and what's going on financially, and I mean, I don't think the NHL is going to be the savior of all of this. And I think we need to stop looking to them to become that. I think it's going to be sponsorship dollars. I think it's going to be ownership. I just, it would be nice to see a model like the NBA and the WNBA have, but I just don't see that coming to fruition, unfortunately. But, when you talk about the passion that we see for, what happened in Tokyo with the women's soccer team, and how we're going to be glued to our TVs when presumably it's Canada and the US in the women's hockey finals here too, coming up in Beijing. It can't happen every 4 years and continue to, there's going to be a period of excitement, and then it starts to dwindle. And so now is the time to really capitalize on the excitement of that. And, there is a lot more going on in the world when it comes to pro women's soccer, but Canada still doesn't have a top tier women's soccer league, so we're not able to see the Christine Sinclairs and the Kadisha Buchanans play in our backyard. And we need our young people to be able to see themselves reflected. So it's a really, really crucial time for women's hockey. And I'm curious to see what comes next, because there's some growth on I don't want to get too much into it because it's complicated, but there is some growth happening with the Premier Hockey Federation. So I'm curious to see what the next 6 months will look like.
Yeah, let's hope that takes off, because they struggled before with some infighting too. Hasn't helped the situation there either. But
No.
I wanted to say that one of the great characteristics you have is that you're not afraid to take on the NHL. You're not afraid to take on anybody. And recently, you had an editorial on Rogers Hometown Hockey a couple months back when Rick Westhead did the interview with Kyle Beach. You didn't pull any punches, and we have that clip. Vic, can you roll that?
Wow. It's been a really tough week to be a hockey fan. And, that's why I got into this business. And I know I'm speaking to a lot of like-minded people out there who've had a really hard time kind of coming to grips with this and reckoning their fandom with what seems to be happening in the National Hockey League. I'm conflicted. And today, specifically during Gary Bettman's availability, he talked about the progress that's been made over the last 10 years. And I'm very much editorializing here. This is me, Tara, speaking, just making that very clear. But I'd like to say that over the last 18 months, as a fan, I have been disappointed. I have seen a league that has followed, not led, when it comes to Black Lives Matter and racial justice and leading the way in that way. They are not. They're falling behind. I have seen a league that has followed and not led when it comes to staffing with women and people of color in places that matter. I've seen a team this very calendar year draft a player in the first round who was found to have distributed images, sexual images, without consent. And then this last week, we see the most heart-wrenching interview from Kyle Beach, the most heart-wrenching admission that I think we'll ever see in this game. And what I am seeing is all of the players, from the players to anybody who has a voice in this matter and who could say, I'm just so sorry. I see the culture of silence being upheld, and it is devastating. And the reason that I feel so passionate about this, and so many of you do out there, is because this matters to us as humans, and we love this game, and we just want it to be better. And it isn't. And anybody who thinks that this culture is not deeply broken.
Wow. Well said.
Excuse me. I just.
Yeah. I'm feeling
I mean, yeah. No, I'm not verklempt. I swallowed my tea down the wrong way. Yeah, no, it's sort of intense to watch for me right now because, I know how I felt in that moment, and obviously a lot of passion. And again, I will credit Rogers Hometown Hockey. Our producers knew that I was going to say something. They didn't ask to vet what it was I was going to say. Ron, that goes just along with his ability and drive to be a really generous broadcaster. He gave me that space. And obviously, I don't think the NHL is going to call me for a job anytime soon. But I think it's incumbent upon those of us in the press. Yeah, like we're part of that culture of silence, right? When we don't talk about these things and hold the NHL to account. And, we know these things aren't just happening in the NHL. They're happening at every level in every league. If we're not talking about it, then we're part of the problem. So, I don't think it always has to be this impassioned speech, but I think on a more consistent basis, like we need more Rick Westheads out there. We need to start kind of like going like, hey, like that's wrong. That's wrong. I don't care that you're the league that I love. I don't care that you're the league of standard. The hard thing is obviously I work for Sportsnet. Sportsnet is the rights holder in Canada. And so I think many of us feel like we've always had to walk a fine line. But I think it's better for the game when there is accountability.
Well, I was going to say, is there anything you wanted to add to that you've had through a few months now to sort of reflect on? But I think you covered it off pretty well there. I just love the fact that you have the gumption to say what needs to be said, and you're not afraid to say it, and the fact that you work for the rights holder, so be it. This needs to be said. This is what I'm saying, and I know that there has been some pushback from some of the dinosaurs, I suppose, some of the people who have a hard time letting go of the grand old game the way it's supposed to be played, and yeah. But you know what? It's if we don't change, we're doomed to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over and over again, and we never get to where we need to go.
Exactly. And they're the same people who they don't like, you can't say anything. They didn't like when, many of us talked about the disparity between the IIHF, canceling the U18 women's. Like they don't like anything. So I can't, I don't answer to them. I answer to, what my own moral compass is.
Right.
And they're not the future of the game.
Right. And you know what? And that's what we love about you, and keep doing that. And I know you have to have a bit of a tough skin to do that, because when you get pushback on social media, there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of people who say stuff that's just it's easy to sit behind a computer and hide and type up nasty things to say to people, but you've got the courage to say what's truth, and the truth, and you to say it where in an open setting where here it is. Here's what I believe. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, well, that's great too. But I just wish people would be fair when it comes to attacking people through the social methods.
Yeah, it's ugly out there and getting uglier, I think, as the world is a really divided place, and people are just looking for ways to express their anger. So you have to be careful. You have to create your own boundaries and take space. And sometimes I delete Twitter from my phone for a while. And you need to know where your limits lie.
Right. Yeah, we had a situation we looked at it a little while ago with Jody Vance was attacked. Like she had to get the law involved to get somebody who was so harassing her so badly, and that's we don't want to see that kind of thing. And I guess the message I have is like kindness really works. And really I've learned through recovery in that I can't hurt somebody without really hurting myself, even if it's in words.
Right.
And so when I start to spread kindness, it goes a long way, and that gratitude becomes a very key thing in my life, and helps me to just have a better outlook towards the world. When I have a better outlook towards the world is a better place. So, but anyway, Tara, I want to thank you for being in the program. So. Yes, because you make our world a better place, and you do an amazing job. And thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, and appreciate you being in the program.
Well, thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right.
Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.
Hey, I'm Canadian rocker Tommy Gunn, and you got more Joe Tilley Sports coming up.
When I'm working out, I like to wear my Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show t-shirt. It makes me feel handsome and strong. If you want a t-shirt, support the show, click on the link below. Now, back to my workout. 1,761, 1,762, 1,763, 1,764. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Joe Tilley Sports is brought to you by COSA, Central Ontario Standardbred Association, providing a united voice for harness horse people racing at Ontario tracks. Check out your benefits today at COSAonline.com and check out COSA TV on Facebook and YouTube for all the latest harness news and live action updates. Live racing year-round. Go to hpibet.com for all your wagering options. Become a member today, and your first bet is free. That's hpibet.com.
Yes, it's time for my COSA Swiss Pick of the Week. Well, last Saturday night, Doug McNair got the job done on a chilly night at Mohawk. McNair won both ends of the big events on the card, the $3,000 New Year's Claiming Series final, as he got the favorite Mustang Beach up at the wire. McNair also guided Wheels on Fire to victory in the $34,000 preferred pace. Check out this finish by McNair.
Up in time to win.
Mustang Beach
won it by a quarter of a length over Saratoga Blue.
Okay. This week, we're going to Mohawk for Thursday night's 7th race, second leg of the Blizzard Series for 3-year-old fillies and mares. I'm taking Katie's Delight with John Drury in the buggy, $5 win place, and a $1 exacta box 369. My bankroll has slipped $229. We'll have to pad that up again. Now, for all the racing updates, visit COSA TV on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and go to HPI Bet for your wagering options. Time now for the Rycom Wrap, sports news that's close to home. Well, it hasn't been a perfect road trip for the Maple Leafs. I mean, it's hard to believe they couldn't beat the Coyotes in Phoenix, but the Leafs have pretty good. You know, that was a gritty, albeit a tad sloppy effort in St. Louis. Great to see Mitch Marner back. Didn't miss a beat. The All-Stars are getting the job done. Jack Campbell keeps racking up those W's. Austin Matthews has scored in 10 consecutive road games. Unbelievable. Wow. Tough to figure out those Raptors. I mean, they lose to the Pistons at home. I mean, one of the worst teams in the NBA. Then they march into Milwaukee. And the next night, it's a second of back-to-backs. The Dinos hand the defending NBA champs a 7-point loss. Pascal Siakam with 30 points and a triple-double. They did drop a tough game in Miami, but the Raps are going to be a tough come playoff time. They're going to finish somewhere between the number 4 and the number 8 seed, and I'll tell you what, they're going to be a very tough team to handle when the postseason rolls around. Tough loss for the Toronto Rock. The Halifax Thunderbirds were in town in Hamilton, and what a game it was. A splendid contest, spirited too. Austin Shanks scored 5 times for the visiting Birds, who needed overtime to sneak away with a 14-13 victory. The Rock were missing 4 players due to COVID protocol, including Rob Hellier. That's a tough one to lose. Challen Rogers had 2 goals and 7 helpers in a losing cause for the Rock, who fall to 2-4. The Thunderbirds, well, they're a perfect 4-0. We might see another Canadian in the NFL. Yes, indeed. Brampton's John Mechie has opted out of his final season at Alabama to make himself eligible for the NFL draft. Mechie had 96 catches for 1,142 yards and 8 touchdowns before tearing his ACL in the second quarter of the SEC title game. That was a win over Georgia. He helped lead the Crimson Tide to a national title in 2020.
Today's environmental tip, plant a tree. Trees produce oxygen and improve air quality. Trees take in carbon dioxide and store harmful carbon. Trees prevent soil erosion and help lessen flooding. Trees lower temperature by providing shade and cooling water evaporation. ICOM, passionate people who turn complicated business problems into simplified technology solutions. For public and private sector real estate, properties, portfolios, and enterprise customers. Optimize and future-proof smart buildings from the ground up. Smart Tech Solutions, the latest in fault locating, base building network design, managed services, cybersecurity, data analytics. Our fault detection will support all smart strategies, define projected outcomes for capital planning, and reduce environmental impact. Rycom, smart protection solutions. At Rycom, we're building a path to a smart and environmentally friendly future and a carbon-free economy.
Well, I have to tell you, the golf here in Mexico is pretty spectacular. There's an NCAA women's tournament coming up in March at El Tigre here in Nuevo Vallarta. And we'll be checking the course out.
Mexican Marshal at the third tee box with Joe Tilley. Bye, Mexican Marshal.
He likes it.
Oh, yes, he does. Well, so we close with a look at the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. We remind you that the show is available on Spotify, iTunes, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Casts, as well as the Spanglish Network and Zingo TV, and, of course, YouTube. Like and subscribe to the show and the channel on YouTube. Thanks once again to Tara Slone for being on the program. It's great to have her. Thank you for watching. Join us next week when we talk about Being Lease Nation. New film coming up. We'll see you then. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in their early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today, and let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Brought to you by MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business consulting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the needs of our clients in the private, public, and non-for-profit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to doing business and personalized strategies to help people and organizations succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Toronto, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, our team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca to learn more. Hi, I'm Joe Tilley, and I want to tell you about the painting pros. Patrick and his crew recently came into my home, and they painted the walls, they added some color. It's fantastic, and I can't be more satisfied with the work they did. That crew is tremendous. They were professional, they were courteous, they were respectful, and they did a fantastic job. Look at that. Look at that color. I just can't stress enough how satisfied we truly are with Patrick and his crew. For all your painting needs, go with the pros.